Welcome to In the Funnel. My name is Mark Cox. In the Funnel is a group of sales coaches and consultants that help B2B sales teams dramatically improve revenue. Clients come to us when revenue growth is stagnated, or their sales team is not meeting expectations, or they need to recalibrate their sales and go-to-market plan for the upcoming year. Our clients have enjoyed tremendous success working within the funnel, and please hear it straight from them by listening to the testimonial section of this website. What they'll tell you is there's two things that make us unique and different in our space. Number one, we have a process and a methodology. First, for understanding your current state, and then second, for building your sales and go-to-market plan for the upcoming year. The second thing that makes us unique and different is that everybody within the funnel has run a material sales organization in their recent past. We're all practitioners. We don't have any theorists or teachers, and what that means is we can get in front of your sales team and run the next sales meeting, or join them on their next sales call to close your next large prospect. All of us have a passion for professional, disciplined, process-driven sales, and we'd be delighted to talk to you if you're looking to grow revenue for your company. Please feel free to reach out to us through this website at info@inthefunnel.com or by telephone. Thanks for taking the time to watch this.
My wife and I, there's this restaurant we go to for dinner.
Okay.
And at this one intersection, there are about a half a dozen places where you can get a nice steak. And we keep going to the most expensive one. You know, and salespeople hypersensitive on the subject of price, right? I keep going to the most expensive restaurant. And I'm sure the steak I could get at the other ones be about the same. But there's an experience. Like there are a couple of waiters there that we love to have because they know our favorite drink. They are suggestive. So for example, when you're looking at the menu and you order a steak, so you know a really good wine to go with that is this, or hey, you know, we have this side dish that really complements the salmon. My wife's, I do the steak, she does the salmon. And you can tell they genuinely care. You know, it's our night out, that they're not rushing. They're not, so the appetizers there, they're not saying, here is your entree, and you're like shoving plates back. They recognize you're there for an evening, an experience, not to eat. If you want to just eat, you go to McDonald's and pound some burgers. You're there for an experience, a dining experience, and knowing that the person that's interacting with you, the wait staff, that understands that and creates that experience for you, leads you to continue coming back there. And again, that's the opportunity that every salesperson has. Doesn't matter how big or small, doesn't matter what industry you're in. Create an experience where people would prefer to do business with you rather than the alternative.
Team, that was Lee Salz. And Lee is the CEO of Sales Architects. And he's also the author of 6 books, including Sales Differentiation, Higher Right, and Higher Profits. But the book I read was called Sell Different, and it came out in 2021. And it's Sales Differentiation Strategies to Outsmart, Outmaneuver, and Outsell the Competition. This book, like many of the ones we talked about recently, it's got an amazing list of folks who give testimonials at the beginning. It's almost a who's who of the professional selling world, identifying that they're impressed with this book. And frankly, so was I. What I really liked about Lee's book was it's simple, straightforward, with practical examples of how you can apply some of his strategies or processes or tools today, tomorrow, the next day to sell better. We have a great conversation. Lee's a super passionate guy. He's actually quite an athlete. He still competes as a power lifter, extremely impressive. So we talk about a lot of practical examples out there of how industries that you would think are incredibly commoditized, where the salespeople can differentiate themselves. We talk about the fact that in some cases we get in our own way when we're selling and how we can prevent that. Talk about the value of demand generation or cold calling today, and does that work? Lots of great topics today. I really enjoyed speaking with Lee. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. And if you do, please like and subscribe to the Selling Well podcast. That means a lot to us. and thank you for doing so. Here's Lee Salz. Hey, Lee, thanks so much for joining the show. It's great to have you here today.
Thanks, Mark. Great to be here.
So a couple of thoughts on the latest book, Sell Different.
Okay.
First of all, a compliment that I'm going to just throw out. That the testimonials that you have at the beginning of all your books, you have the who's who of thought leaders in professional sales complimenting you on the book. And I know because half of them have been on our show, but you have everybody. So I think that is just fantastic. But before we jump in deeply, and I really want to get into Sell Different, tell us a little bit about your journey in professional sales.
Sure. I did not wake up and say I want to be a salesperson. That was not my journey. No. My original plan was to go to law school.
Oh,
that was the plan. And went to college, was a history major with that plan, but I fell in love with the fitness industry. So I was managing a gym while I was full-time in college, competed in bodybuilding, and quickly found that there's no money to be made in the fitness industry. But that was my first introduction to real sales. I said, boy, I really like this sales thing. So we're going to use fitness as a hobby and we'll make sales the career. And it just went from there. I was in the technology space, in HR services as well. And what I did was I would build sales teams and provide the framework of what has become known as sales architecture to build a support system for them so that they have a foundation when they're selling.
Oh, fantastic. Well, you listen, the book's called Sell Different. We're talking about fit. Even when you were in the fitness industry, one of the things I used to do would be when I was at the gym, I'd be watching the trainers to see how they work with their existing clients. And it would be after an extended period of time of seeing somebody, then I'd then approach them to become my trainer. But you could see how they really differentiated themselves, because some trainers are in a gym, they're getting somebody to do an exercise, they're looking at their watch, they're looking all over the place. And then you find these trainers that while you're working out, they're so focused on you and making the walls could be crumbling down, but they're entirely about you. And those would be the trainers that I'd go to. But today,
Mark, you and I are both fitness guys. So interesting that you brought up about personal training, and because this does tie into the sales world. So if a member goes up to the front desk and says, how much is personal training? What do they tell them?
They give them the number.
They give them a number. The problem is most people, when they're going up to the front desk, that's not what they're looking for. They're looking for an orientation, someone to put them on that first program, show them how the equipment works, and what does the gym charge for that, Mark? Nothing.
Right.
Every one of them does it for free. And so we get caught up in sales a lot of times with our own jargon, and someone uses a word that means something very different in our world than it does to them. And rather than asking questions to really understand what they're asking of us, we give an answer. And one of the things I tell salespeople all the time is sales is not a game show. Because when you're a game show contestant, you're asked a question like on Family Feud and got to give an answer immediately.
Right.
There is nothing wrong with thinking before you answer. Instead of reacting, responding. And a lot of times, the best answer is a question, so that you understand what it is that's being asked of you, like that personal training example. I'll give you another one, Mark, since we were talking the fitness world. There was a study done on when people decided to join a health club. Do you know when that was?
I would assume most of it's between January and March, January and April of every year.
It wasn't a time of year. It was before they set foot in the facility, meaning when they were coming into the health club, they were there to join. And what are salespeople doing? They don't have 100% conversion rate. They are talking people out of it.
That makes a lot of sense. By the way, it makes a ton of sense to me, Lee. And by the way, for some people who haven't grown up in fitness, it's a big deal even walking into the fitness facility. So they had to jump out of their comfort zone just to walk in and ask the question.
That's right.
What
That's right.
what an amazing point. They're not just popping in. They're actually already 3/4 of the way there. Just get out of their way.
Absolutely. And again, think of it from a buyer perspective. How many times have you gone into a store and you were there, credit card on your forehead, you're there to buy. And based on the experience you had, you walked out with that credit card still sitting on your forehead. You didn't buy anything. And that's one of the topics I get into in Sell Different is that whole buying experience. And that's something, it doesn't matter what you're selling, how big your company is, how small your company is, who your manager is, you have the ability to create an experience so that people would rather do business with you than the alternative. And I'll give you an example, Mark.
Please.
My wife and I, there's this restaurant we go to for dinner.
Okay.
And at this one intersection, there are about a half a dozen places where you can get a nice steak. And we keep going to the most expensive one. You know, and salespeople hypersensitive on the subject of price, right? I keep going to the most expensive restaurant. And I'm sure the steak I could get at the other ones be about the same. But there's an experience. Like there are a couple of waiters there that we love to have because they know our favorite drink. They are suggestive. So for example, when you're looking at the menu and you order a steak, so you know, a really good wine to go with that is this, or hey, you know, we have this side dish that really complements the salmon. My wife's, I do the steak, she does the salmon. And you can tell they genuinely care. You know, it's our night out, that they're not rushing. They're not, so the appetizers there, they're not saying, here's your entree, and you're like shoving plates back. They recognize you're there for an evening, an experience, not to eat. If you want to just eat, you go to McDonald's and pound some burgers. You're there for an experience, a dining experience. And knowing that the person that's interacting with you, the wait staff, that understands that and creates that experience for you, leads you to continue coming back there. And again, that's the opportunity that every salesperson has. Doesn't matter how big or small, doesn't matter what industry you're in. Create an experience where people would prefer to do business with you rather than the alternative.
How incredibly important. And if you sell in North America, by the way, the world is so small, depending upon the target market you sell into and the type of whether it's enterprise software, some other form of SaaS, that experience is so critical. And what young people don't always realize is you will keep coming across the same people. They move up the chain, your buyers move up the chain as you move up the chain, and they'll remember that experience, Lee. And there are just countless examples of firms that started with an amazing experience and it tailed off and they paid the price.
Yes.
Think Starbucks 25 years ago. Starbucks 25 years ago was a better cup of coffee and it wasn't even close. And there was a barista who knew how to make a cappuccino. And you went, and the environment was gorgeous. So you went in for a sophisticated coffee experience.
Right.
And then they went through that growth phase where somebody was 16 having their first job trying to mess around with a latte cappuccino cortado, and they had no idea what it was.
Right.
So now you went back to the small boutique Italian coffee shop that gave you that experience.
You know, Mark, you remind me, Home Depot went through the same thing. Remember,
sure they did.
25 years ago, you went into the plumbing section. It wasn't a kid, it was a plumber.
Yes.
Right. And you could ask questions of an expert so that you can do stuff at home. Not that way anymore. It's a different experience. Now you start going, okay, well, if I can have the same experience at 4 different hardware stores, I guess I'm going to go with the cheapest.
You know, everybody, Lee, has had this experience. Everybody listening to the podcast, they have those things, whether it's the clothing they got, the cars they buy, the sports equipment they buy for themselves or their kids. Price goes out the window if you get expertise. I'm a goalie still in hockey. That equipment is expensive, but guess what? If there's a mask that's going to prevent me from getting concussed, and it's $3,000 more than the other mask, I'm buying the better mask. Yes. I need my brain. So
in my house, Mark, baseball is like a religion here. Like it sounds like hockey is with you, although I live in Minnesota, which is, you know, hockey is a religion here, right?
Yeah.
So I'll tell you an interesting story. A number of years ago, I have two sons that today play college baseball. Um, it's the week before tryouts, and I had bought my son an Easton bat,
Okay.
and the bat broke, still covered under warranty. And I'm looking at this window of time saying, okay, so I can call Easton and they're going to want me to send it to them and they're going to examine it and send it back. I called them up. I told them what happened. I said, my son has tryouts in a week. You know what the response was?
What's that?
Oh my goodness. I'll tell you what, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to overnight a bat to you today.
Wow.
And then when you get that package, put the broken bat in and send it back to us. Want to make sure that your son is all set for tryouts. And if you know anything about Easton bats, they are pricey. I mean, these bats are $300, $400, $500.
Wow.
Not cheap. And that type of an experience says, okay, I want to keep buying from them. Someone's going to come along with a cheaper bat, but I want to keep buying from them because of the experience and how they support me.
Well, we've again, Lee, it's a good reminder for everybody out there listening, because we know the salespeople often default to, hey, why'd you lose the deal price? And I lost the deal on price because the buyer saw no differentiation between me and everybody else. And since you've touched on the topic of baseball, I think because we're talking about sell different, there's a great story in the book where you speak.
I have one of those. You mean this one?
That book. Yeah, they're everywhere. Those books are everywhere. By the way, I really like the look of the cover, but you do speak about at the beginning of the book, you talk about differentiation and how that experience is so important. And you and your son went through a recruiting exercise with colleges who were trying to recruit him to play baseball. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so my son Steven had aspirations of playing college baseball. And during his junior year of high school, my wife Sharon and I kept saying, hey, Steven, need to set up college visits. And he was a little slow in doing so. Come to find out, a lot of kids were a little slow in scheduling those visits. And then that summer, between his junior and senior year, he was asked to play on our city's American Legion baseball team.
Oh, nice.
And if you're not familiar with American Legion, this is where all the college scouts come looking for top talent.
Okay.
And during a 1-week tournament, Mark, he hit 4 home runs and 3 doubles.
Wow, nice.
We didn't have to tell Steven to call the colleges. The colleges were now calling us.
Nice.
And if you've ever been through a college recruiting experience before, you know it's a sale. These colleges are trying to sell you on their institution, but they can't differentiate what they're selling. They can't add a major. They can't build a dorm. They can't move the campus. Gosh, they can't even change the meal plan. All fixed assets. But every one of them has the opportunity to differentiate the way they sell, to sell different. And I got to tell you, Mark, some of these coaches were amazing at it, and some failed miserably. Now, when you first cross onto a college campus, as soon as you go across the border, your blood pressure jumps 30 points.
Yeah.
Do you know why that is, Mark? It's not the tuition.
It's because you're lost. You have no idea where to go. It's confusing.
It's because you can't find a place to park. Every parking lot on a college campus says park here and we're going to tow you, but welcome to our fine institution. Well, this one school we visited, we pull into the parking lot and there's a spot with Steven's name on it.
Nice.
Stopped us dead in our tracks. Then we go inside. There's an agenda for the day. Steven's name printed right at the top. What did it cost this college to do these two things, Mark? A penny, maybe, for the paper and the ink? But think about what they did. They made us feel like Steven was the only athlete they were recruiting anywhere on the planet for any sport that they offered. Of course, that wasn't the case, but that's how they made us feel. There's another school, went there as a rainy day, and the coach told Steven to text him when we got there, which he did. 3 assistant coaches come out with golf umbrellas.
Oh, lovely.
Facility, right? We sit down with the head coach and he says, I hope you don't mind, but I didn't invite admissions to join us here today. I'm going to take you on the tour. He spent 4 hours with us that day.
Wow.
Afterwards, he was texting and emailing with Steven, not saying, did you make a decision, getting to know him, seeing how his senior year was going. Invited him to come back to campus and have dinner with a bunch of the players and go to a women's volleyball game. Now, Mark, how do most kids find out that they've been accepted to college?
They get a letter.
You get a letter. We always want the thick one, right? The
Right.
thin one's bad news, the thick one's good news. But that's not how Stephen found out. He got a call from this coach saying, "Welcome to Augsburg University," and he accepted.
Oh, fantastic.
Little dad brag moment here. He's been Dean's List every semester, and he's the cleanup hitter on the team, and he's been leading in every offensive category. So proud papa moment there.
Oh, it's great. Well, first of all, congratulations. Second of all, so by the way, for everybody listening, we've got CEOs listening, we've got sales leaders listening. Think about that. Just take a pause. Is your HR team the one notifying a candidate that they've been successful through the interview process and via email saying we'd like to offer you a job? Or are we picking up the phone, whether it's the CEO or the VP of sales or CRO, calling up and saying, "Hey, Lee, I've got some good news. I wonder if you could give me a call back," and have that live conversation and explain why we're so excited to have them join our team.
So, Mark, you raised an interesting point. I do hiring process development.
Well, you've written a book on it, by the way.
I have. Hire right, higher profits. Yes.
There you are.
And one of the mistakes that companies make is when they're not interested in a candidate, whatever phases of the process, what do? They go dark on them. There's no communication. And what happens? The candidate comes away with a bad taste in their mouth. And when you have a bad taste in your mouth, it's like the shampoo commercial, and they told two friends, and so on and so on.
No kidding.
It kills your brand, and it's not necessary. Every company should have a candidate exit program. For those that you're not interested in hiring, that's fine. I'm not saying hire them, but treat them respectfully.
Yes.
Right? Especially, you know what I see it all the time in retail. You still want them to buy in your store.
Exactly.
You may not want them as an employee, but you still want them to shop in your store. Have a way to communicate with them to let them know that you're not going to be proceeding further with them. And you see this, you send in a resume, you have initial conversation, an interview, maybe even a second interview, and then nothing, crickets chirping. And what an irritant, because you feel disrespected.
It's irresponsible, by the way, I think, Lee, on behalf of the company on a number of fronts, because let's not forget that individuals contributed some of their valuable time going through an interview process. And one of the things that we're big advocates of, two things. You, first of all, regardless of how they found your organization, whether it's an executive recruiter or other, they deserve to hear from you where they're going, what's going on. And they should always know where they are in the process. Because if you go quiet because, I'm never going to, offer Mark a job.
Right.
Mark should know, because Mark has other opportunities that he's juggling that he may defer because he was more keen on yours. So that I find it very irresponsible. And one easy tactic for everybody out there, if someone's gone through an interview process with you, meaning maybe a screening interview and a full 1 hour interview, if we have to say, hey, they're not moving forward in the process, at a minimum, send them a video email. Hey, Lee, it was so nice to meet you. I really appreciate your interest in the funnel. Unfortunately, we can't move you forward in the process at this point in time, but I really enjoyed meeting you. And we're going to keep you on file for the next 6 to 12 months. If something else comes up, we'll reach out to you. But I'm pretty convinced you're going to be successful in sales, and good luck with your future endeavors.
Perfect. You know how to help executives get it, Mark? Because we know this person is going to get hired somewhere.
Yes.
What are you going to do if they get a job at your biggest client or one of your strategic partners? Right. And they're going to go in and they're not going to say how wonderful you are. They're going to say, you know what, I actually interviewed there and they didn't treat me well.
Right.
Oh, they didn't treat you well. Tell me about that. Now maybe this client relationship can unravel, or a partnership. Don't do it. It's not necessary. This is completely avoidable. Candidate exit program. That's what every company should have.
And I'll just call it right off the top, and people on this podcast have heard it. If you're in sales, don't leave any of this to an HR department. Okay? Because one of your major responsibilities for life is building an amazing sales organization. You have to manage those relationships. HR is great. Maybe they can find them. They can do a quick screening interview, but you got to take over and own it. Lee, I'm loving this conversation, by the way.
Same here.
And I've just got to make sure that we stay on point, because I do want to speak to Sell Different and team out there. This is a great book. So everybody listening to the Selling Well podcast know we're all always about trying to grab some strategies, processes, tools, tactics that we can hear on a podcast like this today and apply tomorrow. And this book, Sell Different and Sales Differentiation, hits that mark. Really well written, really speaks to practical examples and detailed examples. But let me throw it back and have a little fun with you here, Lee. The book's called Sell Different.
Yeah.
Last time I checked, there's a little over 1,500 books out there on selling. What's different about this book?
We've been talking here, Mark, for, I don't know, about 10, 15 minutes, having a pleasant conversation. We're laughing. And now you come along and you put me on the spot.
Let's hear it.
Tell me there's all these books out there. What's different about your book? Is that really fair? Is that nice?
That's
Well,
our
for
interview
salespeople,
style, Lee. We like to surprise
okay.
people. It really helps with ratings, by the way, if we just have some conflict like this.
Well, guess what, Mark? That is a fair question. And salespeople, whether your buyers ask you that question point blank, like Mark did, or not, that's the big question on their minds every time they meet with a salesperson. They want to know what's different. And if you can't articulate it, if you can't demonstrate it, Mark Price wins the day. So what's different about Sell Different? Well, there's several things. Number one, Mark, I think you'd agree today, for most salespeople, sales has never been tougher, right? When you look at the differences between features and functions, differences are so narrow, right? So how do you differentiate from one provider to another? And I don't know about you, Mark, but I haven't found any executives coming along saying, hey, salespeople, I know it's tough out there. We're going to lower your quota by 30%. Go ahead and sell the deal at 50% lower margin points. We're cool with that. No, what's every sales management executive saying? Your quota went up 30%, and don't you dare sacrifice margin while doing so.
Right.
So how do you do that? How do you do what I just trademarked? How do you win more deals at the prices you want? You have to sell different. And what that means is looking at every touch point, every interaction that you have with a buyer, and saying, how do I outsmart, outmaneuver, and outsell the competition? And that's exactly what that book does. And Mark, I think one thing you'd agree with me as you read through it, I went through a pretty sophisticated editing process. And one of the challenges I had for my editors, I said, what could you not implement based on reading it? I wanted this to be that you read a chapter and you can say, I get it. I don't need to pay this guy to do this for me. I can do it myself. So from how you handle discovery, virtual selling, how you deal with the ultimate deal killer, which is fear of change. All of these topics are laid out in a way that it's fully executable. Because again, you said, what's different about this relative to most sales books? How many sales books have you read, Mark, where you go, boy, this is fantastic content. The only way I can do anything with this information is if I spend tens of thousands of dollars and hire the guy to come in and help me implement it. That's not what this is. Each one of those 15 chapters stands alone, has a strategy, explains why it's important, and step by step how to implement it.
Well, Lee, I would agree, by the way, and I read a lot of sales books. So you're probably our 50th or 60th podcast, but we, out of respect for guests, we actually read the books. And then we kind of study the books. And by the way, I think there's a lot of great stuff in many of the books out there, but some of them are an easier read and some of them are a highly difficult, complex read. One of the things I really like about your book, by the way, even, which I hadn't seen before, is page 71 onward. You actually summarize in 4 pages what we do with our books. Anyway, we highlight them and then we pull out the key points, and then we try and have a 2-page summary document to prep me for a podcast, and also to keep in our library going forward for coaching clients. You actually do that for us. I really appreciated that at the end of the book. I thought that was very, very helpful to go to those key concepts. And you've got an interesting take on a couple things. So one of the things, if it's okay, Lee, I'd like to talk about prospecting, particularly outbound prospecting.
Yes.
Because let's say I was 15 years younger and was getting a lot of my knowledge from internet platitudes on how to sell, and I'd never been through any formal sales training, today I might actually believe that outbound prospecting doesn't work. And then I can count on growing my pipeline through social media selling or social media marketing, and it'll give me a steady stream of inbound leads.
Yes.
I
You
you
hear
take
that
a
all
bit
the
of
time.
you take a contrarian opinion to that, as do I. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts about outbound prospecting.
Yeah, so a lot of salespeople believe outbound prospecting is dead. And my friends over at the Rain Group, are you familiar with those folks?
We sure are. They're Canadian.
I know. And they conducted a study about a year and a half ago where they asked executives if they've ever taken a meeting from a salesperson who reached out through some form of prospecting. And I love asking audiences this. I just did this a week ago at a keynote. How many executives, what percentage said, yes, I took a meeting with a salesperson that reached out through some form of prospecting? And the highest number given was 10%. The correct answer, audience, get ready for this, 82%. 82% of executives said, yes, I took a meeting with a salesperson who'd reached out to me through some form of prospecting. But the study went a step further. They got to the secret sauce, the key ingredient to getting that meeting. You know what that was, Mark?
What's that?
Personalization. There's all this automation out there, and we lose that personal touch. So if you're sending generic emails, leaving generic voicemail messages, or when you reach someone live, it's a generic conversation, you're not going to be in that 82% group.
Right.
It's all about personalization. So outbound prospecting is alive and well. An interesting aspect, I've asked some friends of mine who do, I don't know, 2 to 5 keynotes a week. Well, big names. And I've asked them, what percentage of your leads for keynote speaking come from just inbound referral? Your name is out there. What would you guess the percentage, Mark, that they said was outbound work that they did?
For those people doing that kind of work, and I know these, by the way, I know these people, they've all been on the show, with the exception of one. All your buddies have been on the show. I would say those guys, 60 to 75% of their leads, they have to go and get.
Yep. So these big household names that wrote the books and all that stuff, they are still about 60% outbound. They're having the dedication. I know Meredith Elliott Powell. Have you had her on the show?
Not yet.
She's one to have on. She'll tell you she makes 3 calls every single day. Doesn't matter if it's a holiday, doesn't matter if it's a weekend. Every single day.
What a
And when she talks about what she does between Christmas and New Year's, while everyone else is relaxing, she's putting together her landscape for prospecting into the keynote opportunities for the next calendar year.
I just love that. I love that. You get into this habit, and once it's a habit, once we ingrain that habit, like your powerlifting, it's every day. You've got to do it. You can't help yourself. But the other thing, just for people to take away, I'm always big on why. So when I read that Rain Group stat of the 82%, I wasn't surprised at all, because frankly, I guess I should be more fair. Probably was surprised it was that high when I first read it. But when I start to think about the companies we work with and the executives we work with, they're always referencing conversations they've had with either good or bad salespeople, but they had the conversations. Because senior executives actually do take calls from salespeople because they wish their salespeople were reaching out and making those kinds of conversations. So they'll take it early in the morning, late in the afternoon, and they actually show a little bit of respect for the fact you're actually doing it. You get more leeway from some of those folks, but I'm completely with you, Lee. I think the amazing Salesforce automation tools and marketing automation tools, they were great at one point in time, but now they're just polluting the environment. And it's 300 billion emails go back and forth every day. Half of them are spam.
Yeah. Mark, I want to come back to something you just mentioned. You mentioned it in passing, but it's something really important for our audience. You said making calls before and after business hours. And that brings up, and again, this is talked about in Sell Different, is we need a strategy for the qualitative aspect of prospecting, but we also need one for the quantitative side. Salespeople don't make enough attempts. I left a message once, I sent one email, I guess they're not
Right.
interested, right? This group was funny, that I keynoted about a week and a half ago. They said, if it wasn't for your persistence, you wouldn't be here.
Right.
And yeah, complimentary. I was very appropriate with how I was following up with them, but they recognized this was the rigor their own salespeople needed.
Yes.
That they just, oh well, I left a couple messages and that was it. But we need strategy for the quantitative side of doing creative things. So one of them that you mentioned, Mark, is if you're only prospecting at 10 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon, yeah, best of luck getting anybody live. You
Right.
want to reach executives, you want to say, how do I not have the gatekeeper? The gatekeeper's 9 to 5. But the executive is not. You want to reach the executive, you call outside of those business hours.
These are things that we've known for decades, folks. Like the interesting thing I always find, Lee, is this is not new. But the reality is that you and I know, actually, having spoken to or coached thousands of salespeople, is it isn't done. There's a model where somebody who has a medium degree of success in sales starts managing current accounts and they stop prospecting. So now they're no longer good at prospecting. And if you're not good, it's kind of scary. It just falls off. And so
It's amazing. The drills that my sons learned for baseball when they were 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, like hitting off a tee, is the same thing the professional Major League Baseball hitters do every single day. Everybody wants to find the silver bullet, the secret sauce. There isn't one. It's putting in the time every single day so that you do something today so that you're more effective tomorrow. That's how, we toss around this expression, professional salesperson. And I take issue with that, because what happens is we use this word, professional salesperson, and we contrast it with a professional athlete. And I talk about this in Sell Different. And if you think about those, you can see why they're commonly uttered in the same breath. But there's one difference that is so significant that once I explain it, you'll never say salesperson and professional athlete in the same breath again. What does a professional athlete do? They work hours, days, weeks, months, years, perfecting their craft so that when they're in competition, they perform flawlessly. What do most salespeople do? They play the game over and over again, hoping to be better next time. Now, we do have that expression of professional salesperson. If we want to be recognized as a professional salesperson, we have to do it the same way as a professional athlete. Do something today and every day to make yourself more valuable to your prospects and clients tomorrow. Doesn't matter if today is a weekend, doesn't matter if today is a holiday. Every single day, do something to be more valuable for your prospects and clients tomorrow.
Well, that's the concept of growth orientation. And so those people at a professional level, your son at a college level for baseball, super high level, every single human in Canada has to play hockey. It wasn't even an option for us. And we loved it. We loved it. Violent sport, but we loved it. But the same idea comes, like, are we at that point today where we say we're a know-it-all, or are we a learn-it-all? And the learn it all means I want to take some data, but I want to rehearse. I want to practice. I want to think through what's going to happen in that meeting in advance. We tend to think we're so good at improv, and we're awful at improv. And so this is the one message we try. By the way, mature, mid-career and senior career sales professionals can change, but you have to want to. And the reality of it is today, I think you need to. Because I think you talk about the biggest competitor. One of the biggest competitors we're seeing right now, and it's going to increase with 8 to 10% inflation, is do nothing. Mm-hmm. So if you're working with a buyer today, they're not going to put their career on the line to make a decision that's going to put them in a dangerous spot moving forward, it's easier for them to miss out than it is to mess up.
And we call that status quo,
Yes.
but I think that's a misnomer. I look at that as fear of change.
Yes.
See, when you're the one whose ink is on the paper saying, yes, we are going to outsource something that's never been outsourced before, or we're going to change providers, we're going to change suppliers, and that goes wrong, we're going to find you, and your career is in jeopardy.
Right.
And I'll tell you, one of the opportunities that so many salespeople miss out on, again, this is another topic that I address in Sell Different, is when we talk about this fear of change, we have the ability to neutralize that concern in the way we talk about client onboarding, or call it implementation, or however you want to refer to it. It's the bridge from where I am today and what I'm doing to being fully implemented with you. And if I can't visualize that, if I can't see that path, I'm not making a change.
Right.
And most salespeople don't bring that up proactively. So the first step is companies need to put together, if they haven't already done it, create a marketing version of the client onboarding. They have a way that they operationalize them, but how do you do that in a way that salespeople can articulate it? So you need to have a document, color, just like your marketing slicks for your products and services, that lays out, here is the journey that you go through. And it doesn't have to, it's not meant to be a detailed flow chart. It's high level. So here's the first thing that happens once you decide to work with us. We're going to do this, and this is what happens in this phase. Here are things you can do that will shorten that phase. Here are things you can do now in preparation for that phase. If we proactively bring up that conversation, we give them a high level of confidence to say, this is going to work. I can make the change.
Huge point. And by the way, you'll remember Matt Dixon from the Challenger sale.
Sure.
And with Brant Adamson, his newest book coming out this week is called The Jolt Effect. And it's on that, because the status quo is becoming the major competitor. And it's exactly that. They call out that there's this fear of concern about the outcome. And if you can alleviate that by walking them through what's going to happen from this point forward, I completely agree with you, Lee. I don't think companies do that well at all.
No.
And
No.
you can
we lead that as a mechanical conversation,
right
at the very, very end. See, and I like that as a test question. Am I reading the tea leaves properly? So in other words, we think we're getting buying signs, and we say, one of the big questions that clients have is, how do I go from where I am today to being fully installed with you guys? I can't visualize that. Well, we have a well-structured client onboarding program. Would you like me to walk you through it?
Fantastic.
If they say no, you're not reading the tea leaves properly.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Because if I'm serious about making the change, I want to understand that. If they say yes, of course, you explain it, and then everything is looking strong for your deal.
Hey, Lee, I'm going to keep a little bit of an eye on the time, and I'm going to point to one other point I'd like to talk about in your book, because this one I just jumped out at me. So it's referrals from existing clients or existing prospects. And I'm going to explain how I used to ask for them. And I'd like you to call out what's wrong with this and showcase for me.
Sure.
So, because I think it's just a wonderful missed opportunity for most salespeople. But Lee, if you were one of the clients, before I read your book, if you were one of our clients, I'd reach out to you and go, Lee, first of all, thank you so much for being a wonderful client. I really appreciate the opportunity of working with you. And you've asked me a couple of times how you can help our business, which I'm so appreciative of. One way you can help me is, what conferences do you go to? And what things do you read, to stay current in the industry? What do you do? What's wrong with the way I asked that question?
I wouldn't say it's so much wrong, but I think there's an opportunity to enhance it.
Perfect.
So this is what I call the if you were me strategy.
Right.
Okay. Now, we would all love business development if we could take our best clients, stick them in a copier as a way to replicate and grow the business. I'm not a magician. I don't have a solution for that, but it doesn't have to be as hard as we make it. So Here's a strategy that I'm batting 1,000 with. I know you're a hockey guy, Mark. I'm a baseball guy. It has worked every single time. I did it when I managed sales teams. I've done it on a consulting basis. I've heard from my readers because the strategy isn't Sell Different. Every single time it's worked. It's produced results. So here's the conversation. Notice I said a conversation. We're not sending an email. We're not sending a text. We're not leaving a voicemail message. This is someone with whom you have a relationship. Mark, you've been working with us for a number of years, so you're familiar with the quality of what we offer and the breadth of products and services that we offer. If you were me,
Right.
what associations would you be active in? What conferences would you attend? What events would you go to? What would you be reading to meet more people like you? We make sales so much harder than it needs to be, and it's an open book test. And you'll be amazed how much feedback you get from your clients. First of all, at the end of it, you notice I said to meet more people like you. It
Right.
strokes their ego. And there's been studies done on are people being willing to help others? And it's in the upper 90 percentile. But there's a caveat that the lion's share said, if I'm not asked, I'm not offering it.
Right.
So if you're not having this conversation with clients, you're not getting. And I'll share with you a neat story. So a coaching client of mine, I gave him this assignment, have 10 of these conversations in 2 weeks. He got 7 done. From one of his clients, he found out about a technology council in his own backyard that he didn't even know existed. Its members were people he was trying to prospect into and had been unsuccessful. And his client says, I could bring you as my guest if you'd like. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
And here's the best part of the story. A few months ago, he was invited to present at this council that prior to the If You Were Me strategy didn't know existed, and he had been unable to reach its members who were on his target list.
Well, I love the way you simplified it in the book, Lee, by the way. And the big difference, the learning I've got is I used to ask people, what are you doing? And they'd come back and tell me what they've been up to. But it's so much different that if you were me,
Yes,
because they may not be attending certain conferences because they don't have budget for it.
correct.
Or they may not no longer be reading certain materials because they already know the information, or they already went through that type of course or that type of program. So it puts a different paradigm. If you say, if you were me, they go back to that. Okay, now I'm going to look at it through Mark's eyes for his business. The answers are different.
Absolutely.
And so in between the time I read your book and this podcast, I've actually been applying that. You do get a different approach. I really, really like that one.
So you're going to keep my batting average at 1,000 then, huh?
I'll keep it nice and high. Now we like shot percentage. I'm a goalie, so we like shot percentage. But I think it's fantastic.
So Mark, we've talked for about 45 minutes. Nothing we've talked about here today has anything to do with what you're selling. It's all about how you're selling. And that's such an important takeaway for all of our audience. It doesn't matter what you're selling, you have the opportunity to sell different. And we've shared so many strategies today that let you do exactly that.
Well, Lee, you're absolutely right. And first of all, thank you for joining our podcast here today. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. And it's just been great. One of the joys we have of doing the podcast is it does force us to read all of these great books like yours. And gang, the most recent book is Sell Different, Sales Differentiation Strategies to Outsmart, Outmaneuver, and Outsell the Competition. Lee, how do we learn more about you and your business for all of those listening today?
So my main website is salesarchitects.com, ARCHITECTS.com. You can learn more about the Sell Different book by going to selldifferentbook.com. And you can actually download the first chapter to read, or the audiobook version. You can do that free right off that site. And if you decide to purchase the book, there's a video series that I've created. Every week for a year, you'll get an email with a link to a video. So what you do is go back to selldifferentbook.com, sign up for that video series, and you'll get an email every week for a year that'll help you implement what you've read.
Oh, fantastic value. 50 videos over the course of the year, 52. Lee, thanks again for today.
Thank you.
And team, thank you for listening. As always, if you enjoyed what you heard today, please like and subscribe to the Selling Well podcast. And thank you for doing that. And by the way, remember, we're growth oriented. So we really love constructive criticism. We exist to provide you with strategies, processes, or tools that you can apply today to your business and your industry. And if there's ways that we can make this podcast more valuable to you, please tell me. We love constructive criticism. Here's my personal email that I check. It's markcox@inthefunnel.com, MARKCOX @inthefunnel.com. Send us your ideas. We'll apply them and we'll keep getting better with this podcast. We'll see everybody next time.